Hey folks, Steve here with another Fatal Alliances video. This is going to be a continuing on from our previous video, which was detailing a actual 1914 scenario playthrough with the rules explained as we go. We covered the first impulse of the first turn, and I think in this video we're going to try to do at least the second impulse of the turn, and if we can get into a few other things, we can certainly try to. It's just going to depend on how much explanation I provide for certain rules. So if you didn't watch the first video, I would recommend you go back and watch that and get a good handle on what we've done so far. We've done the basic setup, and we've had the Austro-Hungarian invasion of Serbia, which resulted in the capture of Belgrade. I was going to have some morale effects on Russia. We did flip a Serbian corps, but we spent this artillery's, real use here, and sort of shaping things up for an offensive maybe next impulse, the impulse after this one. Because the last impulse was a Central Powers impulse, we will be playing through an Allied impulse on Impulse 2. Now, like we did in the previous video, there are certain there's certain rules that you have to follow for the first couple impulses of the game. Sorry for my pause there. I had to make sure I was recording. So the first impulse of the game required that Austria-Hungary declare on Serbia. There no other declaration of the war could be made, and they would take a land action. All other powers passed. In the second impulse, Russia must declare war on Austria-Hungary. No other declarations of war may be made. All other powers may pass. So that is where we're going to go here for the video. So with that in mind, we're going to focus on Russia, and again, all the other powers are going to pass. All the other allied powers or powers that would be in that same side. Referring back then to our sequence of play. Let me pull that up just as a reminder for us. Because this is the second of a pair of impulses, we will not be doing another determined weather step. That's going to happen at the beginning of the next impulse when the Central Powers will go again. And so we're just going to follow on through then with what will be the declare war step. So Russia will be declaring war on Austria-Hungary. Now, when Russia does declare that, what that's going to do is cause a U.S. entry action. So if you take a look at your player aid chart, I won't be sharing mine because that is considered information that I guess they don't necessarily want shared freely. So please check your own. We would look at the U.S. entries action chart, and let's see if Russia, it's either Russia or the Allies declare war on a country. I just want to validate here. It's somewhere on here. I said in the last video, if you're the U.S. player, you probably want to have a pretty good grasp of what all the actions are so that when they occur, you can take action immediately. Okay, Russia declares war on Austria-Hungary. That is a -9. So we'll do a roll for both the U.S. entry pool and the Commonwealth entry pool. So we'll go ahead and do that. So the first roll for the United States, if it is 9 or lower, we're going to pull a chit out of the U.S. entry pool. And it is, so we'll pull it out, and it was the 3. The 3 goes back in the pool, and then for the Commonwealth, it is a 9, so it still happens for the Commonwealth. That comes out. Now, it's not really specified in the rules when this ought to happen, or at least I couldn't find it. The Commonwealth gets to draw an extra entry marker each allied impulse, and because this is an allied impulse, they are going to get to draw a chit, and I'm just going to do that now, since I don't think it's going to really impact anything else at this point. So we'll pull that, and it's a 4. So I think the Commonwealth is making out all right. They're at 8. They're still nearly halfway to entering the war. That's not too bad. If you want to validate the U.S. entry and Commonwealth entry bits in the rules, the rule book has that in. We can check the table of contents, obviously, but it is going to be section 13.2 of the rules, where they go over the entry, the types of things that are going to cause entry chits to enter the pool, and then what you can do with them. Basically, you're taking sort of like political actions that will change things for the game until the individual powers can actually enter the game. So we've done the declare war step. And I don't think there's anything else in this part of the turn that they need to worry about. So they declared war on a major power, which is different than last turn. They've declared war on Austria-Hungary. We did U.S. entry action. There are no allocation of minor countries we need to do here. Okay. So we are going to get to call out the Russian reserves. So in the 9th step of the declare war phase, there is a bit about active major powers and minor countries may call out their reserves. The reserves are going to be in the force pools. So Russia's force pool, we have the reserve pool here. And then actually there is even a Serbian reserve unit that was not placed on the board at setup, and because Serbia is controlled by Russia, they are going to be able to call out all of those reserves. Again, we don't have to call out all of the reserves, but because we're not playing with any additional options, there's no reason for us not to do that. So I'll just start with Serbia. I'll pull theirs out, and they're the last unit in the original force pool for Serbia. And because it has to go into a city, a home country city. Oh, well, by gosh. So here's the thing. This is going to be worth mentioning for the future because it may come into play as we go through the game. This unit has an M in it that you can barely see with the red. It's probably hurting your eyes to look at it like that. The militia unit for the M, militia, has a city identified on it, which is Belgrade. The unit here for being a militia means that, ordinarily reserves could come in home country cities, so it would be Skopje. It would be called in at, but because this is specified to be Belgrade, and it cannot place Belgrade due to Belgrade being in enemy-controlled hands, this unit actually is not going to get called in. And so what I'm going to do is just put this unit in the Russian force pool, sort of out of play. If the Allies ever take Belgrade back, I believe the militia unit can go into the force pool and be called out at that point. But because the city is already under enemy control, we will not get to place that militia unit. That might be a reason to put these forces up further to protect Belgrade, but again, it's very likely that Austria-Hungary was going to take that city anyway, and we'd still lose access to the militia as the Allies. So, sorry, Serbia, you're going to have to rough it out without your militia. Separately, though, if I zoom back out a little bit so we can get a better look at Russia proper, and we'll even zoom out even more, obviously Russia has a lot of land to work with and a lot of places to put units. Looking at their force pool, they have a lot of reserve units and a lot of militia units. However, there is a certain restriction in play, and I'm just going to move these around a little bit. When you look at the reserves for Russia, you will note that some are just the militia, some have reserves, the res at the top, and then you have the reserve pool. And these ones in the reserve pool with the GE stand for Germany, which means Russia can call these units out like any other reserve if they are at war with Germany. So because of that, the only reserve units that we actually have access to are these ones here. So we're going to ignore these for now, and we're just going to put these out. I'm just going to throw them on the map, and then we'll think about where we want to place them in a minute. So first things first, the ones with the M's are those militia units, and like the Serbian unit that said Belgrade, these are likely going to have cities on their front. So we'll go ahead and flip them, though when they get called in, they're actually supposed to be placed face down. We'll revert them once we get it set up. So first things first, we'll grab, I'll zoom in a little bit, Ekaterinburg, I want to say is how you say that, Ekaterinburg, and I'm not sure if this is actually on the Europe map or not. It might be on the world map, actually. Let's find it. Oh boy, looks like I even have some units that were out here already. Ekaterinburg, here we go. Bear with me, here we go. Ekaterinburg goes to Ekaterinburg, and we'll flip it. There we go, face down. Next is Kharkov, which should be on the Europe map here somewhere. Kharkov. Then we have the Kiev militia unit. So we will place this unit in Kiev. Face down. And we have the Minsk. So we will plop them in Minsk. Flip. And let's see, Rostov, which should be down somewhere around here. Yep. Flip. Saratov is right. There it is. Here. Flip. Tsaritsyn. Done. And then, oh, good, Vladivostok. So that's going to go on the world map on the far eastern side on the little peninsula. Not peninsula, it's on the edge. So flip and place it. This is off screen, I'll show you in a second. There it is. Vladivostok is right here across the Sea of Japan. And there goes the militia unit face down. And so that leaves us with a few actual reserve units. And just to flip them to show their combat power, some of them are actually decent. This particular one is a Siberian Corps. I can't recall if I have to set this unit up in Siberia. I'm going to guess not. Let me do a quick check of the rules to see if there's anything about that. No, it doesn't look like it, so I think we're okay to just set up the unit wherever we wish. And the real question will be, where do we want to do that? So we can take the militia units that are out there and bring them to the front here. So I think what we want to do, I'm going to keep the two cavalry units together, and we will put them in these would be good working the way through the mountains because of their higher movement speed, which can come in handy when traversing mountains. So we'll actually put them down in Odessa with the idea that they can come up here and help. And then these two infantry corps, we will put, let's put them in Vilna for now. And the idea here will just be that they can help support the northern part of the front and are close enough that if they wanted to, um, they could move down here, they can move down south. I don't want to put them in Brest-Litovsk because they might hinder retreats that might need to happen. If I need to pull these units out and sort of retreat out of Poland and maintain a better line, I don't want them to be clogging up stacking limits. So I'll keep them back here where at least they're going to have an easier time of maneuvering wherever they need to be. And I think that is probably going to be good enough. I think that'll be good enough for now. Okay, so back to the sequence of play. Get situated here. Okay, so now we would choose our action. Again, the rules have specified that we are going to take a land action, and typically Russia is going to be doing land actions all the time. They are primarily a land power, probably no surprise there. So our number of activities will be limited by our power limits. Checking on our charts, we can tell that for when it matters, Russia is going to get to have 2 air missions, and for everything else, we could get 3 rail moves, which we're probably going to make use of, rather than Austria-Hungary, who really didn't have much in the way of rail moves they wanted to make. We actually have some units here on the world map that might be worth rail moving. Some of these units had to be set up in the world map part of the map. I think some of these, I'm not sure which exactly, these ones in Kazan and Kyubyshev, I think had to be placed here. I can't remember off the top of my head, so apologies for that. But we could take a couple of these if we wanted to and rail them west to help, and I think we might end up doing that, if only just to help show the rail movement process as a demonstration. Again, this video, at least the video series here, I'm not going to focus too much on really great expert play, because I want to make sure I take actions that will demonstrate mechanics and that you get to see that. So that's what I'll attempt to focus on while we go through this. Now let's see. Okay, so yeah, we'll go through now the sequence of play for a land action. So, are there any naval air missions Russia will take? No. Are there any naval movement? No. Naval combat? No. No for that. Strategic bombardment? Not right now. Though something to check out. We actually could. It's just not in range yet. So the Russians have a special unit that they have access to at the beginning of the game. 1913 unit. The Muromets land bomber. Kind of an interesting bomber. It's extraordinarily good for this early in the war. I don't think any other faction has a bomber that's quite this good this early in the game. And you can see it's got, it actually has values for all the possible values you could have. There's a cheat sheet for the unit numbers in the rulebook you could look at, and I think it may even be a handout in the game. But this thing has a 4 air-to-air rating. It's got tactical rating, and it does have strategic bombardment factors, which means we could send this thing out and try to do some strategic bombing. We're not going to do that yet, because where I've placed the unit here in Kaunas is so that it can be used against Germany. And at the moment, Russia is not actually at war with Germany. So while we're not going to be doing strategic bombardment this turn, or this impulse, we will likely try to do some here in following impulses, because we have access to this good plane unit, and it's even got pretty good range too. So this is a pretty strong unit early in the game for the Russians compared to a lot of other folks who have things more like this Blériot plane that doesn't, it's really only good for observing. And I think I closed the sequence of play. Of course I did. There we go. Okay, so no strategic bombardment. Ground strike missions. So, where do we have all of the Russian artillery? Well, I have placed them all up here on the front with Germany, because the German units are, from a combat value perspective, better than every other country. With this setup, I just felt like I wanted to have the artillery up here to make up the difference, and then potentially to assist in taking Königsberg. So down here, where we're actually potentially able to have combats with Austria-Hungary and their units, there are no units capable of doing ground strikes. Doing some double checking, but yeah, nothing that we're really going to be able to make use of here. So no ground strikes. Rail movement. So we are going to do some rail movement. And going back to the rules, we're going to go ahead and find the rail movement rules, and we'll kind of work our way through that. It's relatively simple, though, again, like I've mentioned before, you're going to want to make sure you're using the latest set of the rules, because there are some changes that they've made to rail movement, in particular to moving units from one map to the other. So we're going to make sure we go through that. Russia's going to have 3 rail moves to use. So here are the basic rules for rail movement. You may rail move a unit or factory if it is at a station. A station is a city hex, port hex, or a hex with a HQ unit. Every rail hex is a station when railing an HQ. So all that means is that HQs can, hop on a rail hex anywhere along a rail path, and it can drive around, ride around. But every other unit needs to either be at a city or a port or an HQ unit on a rail line, and then traverse the rail paths to get to where we're going to go. We can move to, it says we can move the unit or factory, so apparently we can still move factories in World War I. From one station to any other station over any distance. We can only move along rail lines, and and your side must control each hex that you enter. Your rail move can only enter or leave a hex in an opponent's zone of control if the station containing a friendly unit before and after, if it is a station containing a friendly land unit both before and after the rail move, and it must stop when it enters an opponent's zone of control. Those are some very specific rules. I'm just reading right out of the rule book, but for the most part, assuming that you're railing units to the front in your home country, you don't really need to worry about them getting sidetracked. You can only rail move a unit that is face up. So all of these militia units, like the one in Ekaterinburg, or these ones here in Ukraine, they could not actually use rail movement this turn because they are face down. And when you're done moving them with rail movement, they become face down. So you can't necessarily move a unit and it jumps and springs right into action. You can move them, and you would either reorg them to flip them up, or wait until the end of the turn when final reorganization happens. Let's see. Normally, each unit you move by rail counts as one rail move. It costs an extra rail move to move a land unit in an air impulse, or an air unit in a land impulse. So we won't be doing any of that. Or a rail move a unit between the Eastern Europe map and world map, a total distance of more than 40 European hexes, 10 world scale hexes, even if only part of your rail move ventures onto the other map. You may not rail from the Western Europe map to the world map. Geez, oh man. Okay, so this is part of the rules that changed in the latest version of the rules compared to before. There's a seam here. You can see it just barely, and you can tell some of the hexes maybe are a little bit off with the patterns. That is the sort of cut point between the Western Europe map and the Eastern Europe map. Fortunately, Russia is pretty much entirely in the Eastern European map, so we only need to worry about that. And let's see. If we were going to cart in some units, where would we want to cart them into? I would say at least Smolensk, if not Vitebsk, or even Chisinau. potentially. And yeah, that's going to be kind of interesting. So let's look at, I'm going to make it these 3 units right here. So traveling by rail, this would be 1 world scale hex, which I believe is equivalent to 4 European hexes. So 1 world scale hex, which should leave us 36 European scale hexes. So starting 41 to 45, it would be this rail line, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31, 30, 29, 28, 27, 25, 20. Yeah, we can get nearly all the way to the line, I think. And because they're flipped down, I don't want them too close to the front. I want them to be able to get to the front. So what we'll do is I will take this unit and I will put it in Minsk. I will take this unit and put it into Vitebsk. I will flip this unit and I will put him I will put him in Gomel. Now Smolensk. I could potentially put these guys further up, but I just want to make sure that they're close to the front, but not too close. By the time they get flipped, the Germans might have even been able to push us back. But at the very least, these guys will be pretty easily able to just move up and start filling holes if units start dying off. So I'm okay with the rail moves as is for now. But you know, if you're playing yourself, you might want to get really specific with counting out all the hexes, making sure they're in the optimal locations. But for my purposes here, I think that's fine, at least to start with. This is the early game. We can kind of work our way through that. Next now is land movement. So these units are all face down, so there's not going to be any land movement from them. I've got some garrison units scattered about. I don't see a reason to move them. They're there just in case the Germans get squirrely and try to do some amphibious drops. Though it might behoove me to put something in Helsinki. I forgot about that, but I won't worry about it now. Again, not at war with Germany, so is there any point to moving these units? Don't know. Probably I could look at moving some of these units, but they're set up as is to an okay degree. I think the main thing to look at now would be the Russians invading Hungary, which they're going to be able to do. But I want to be really careful of supply. So I haven't talked about supply in I don't think really any of my videos so far yet. Here's the basic idea, at least for land supply, which is what we're really focused on right now. Ordinarily, you have a certain amount of distance that can be covered as part of a supply path. And to, I guess, put it really simply, you want to have a basic supply path to some supply source. And a basic supply path is one of 4 hexes in normal fine weather, like it is right now. But then that reduces to 3 hexes in snow or 2 hexes in rain, storm, or blizzard. And that can be very debilitating because if you're spread out a little bit too much, you'll find your units are out of supply. So how do we work that, right? So as the Russians, looking at this front, and this is a very good one to talk about, just because the situation and the lack of Russian cities right in this section of Ukraine. I'm going to hide the counters for a second. Where these units are set up right here, they are relatively far away from a home country city, which is typically the best place you want to be drawing supply from. I'm just trying to validate. Yeah, so there's a primary supply source, which is a friendly city in your unconquered home country, or it's going to be the friendly city of an unconquered home country of a major power that you cooperate with, and Russia doesn't really have anyone to cooperate with at the moment. So, what's the nearest Russian cities? Well, on this front, there's Brest-Litovsk, which is several hexes away from even this unit up here. There is Kiev, which is several hexes away back here. And then there is Odessa, fairly far away, and Chisinau. I think I called it Chisinau earlier. I misspoke. Chisinau, which is actually pretty close, right? So these units, as long as they are right now 3 hexes away, are always going to be able to draw full supply from there, which is good. These guys right here would have a problem, except that this hex here contains an HQ. Now, an HQ is a secondary supply source. The other kinds of secondary supply sources are the capital of a minor country that is aligned with you, which right now, the only real option that we would have to look at is Belgrade, which is taken, or Warsaw, but which is right here. May not last very long once the Germans start pushing. But you would want to be within 4 hexes to a secondary supply source if you couldn't count 4 hexes back to a primary one. So all of these units, if they had to, could trace to the Rennenkampf HQ unit. Then the HQ unit needs to be able to trace a supply path to another secondary supply source, and then that secondary supply source could connect back to another secondary supply source all the way until you get to some primary supply source like Chisinau. Now, the path from the HQ from the secondary supply source to a primary supply source can actually include some non-railway hexes, as long as you can kind of find your way to a railway hex and then count back. And so that's why this unit is not quite on the rail line, because I want to make sure I'm extending supply out to these guys, even if it was blizzard or stormy weather. And then that HQ unit can trace over to this rail line, which ultimately leads back to Kiev or Chisinau or Odessa. A lot of options here. So we're able to really trace supply through these rail lines via this HQ unit, or in the case of these units, they have pretty safe supply back to Chisinau just by themselves. It was important that I explained that because, right now the weather's fine, and for the most part you don't care, but it's very easy to be able to, move up, and let's say a counterattack by the Austrians, the Hungarians, killed Rennenkampf, killed this corps somehow. And it could happen if you're not careful. Well, if that HQ is lost, then half of these units in this sort of front area right here all of a sudden don't have supply, or aren't able to trace supply appropriately. And that's going to be a major problem for them. They won't be able to attack properly. If they get flipped, then they're really screwed. So you got to be careful of supply. And as these fronts sort of open up, knowing where your HQ units are and how vulnerable they are is really going to be important. So knowing that, and we want to look at what you'll want to be careful of is not putting the units out of supply. So as we look to do movement, I'm going to want to make sure I keep the HQ and the cities that are nearby in mind when I do this move, and that I'm careful to maintain all of my good, happy supply. So, firstly, the Russian Mountaineer Corps here is going to simply advance into Cernaudy, or Kernaudy, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, and that is going to take a city from the Austro-Hungarians. Immediately, we need to look at the morale and take note of the change here. So, turn 1, impulse 2, Cernaudy, home country city, -1 morale for Austria-Hungary. So we're going to have, for enemy control of a home country city, it's going to be -1 morale penalty. So, yeah, the Russians are losing 1 for Belgrade, but now the Austro-Hungarians are losing 1 for Cernaudy. And also, because they took a resource or a non-objective city from the enemy, the Allies are going to gain 1 political point, and we'll mark that now. They're up to 6. So, good job, Mountaineer Corps. And I had set these up with the idea that if they can get into the mountains, they're mountain units themselves, they're going to do much better. These units are going to move 1, 2 into this forest. This unit's going to move 1, 2. It's just outside Lemberg. It'd be nice to be able to take it, but I don't think we're going to be able to this turn. Well, we might actually. Let's see. Rennenkampf and this army, it will move up 1, 2, which is their movement. And again, they're still close to controlled rail lines, so the only units that might be at risk in bad weather are going to be these units at the moment. And now we have these units that we're probably going to move. So these guys will go 1, 2. These guys will go 1, 2. And now that we have 2 stack here. Now, here's something interesting to consider. So if I moved these cavalry divisions, I could move them into Lemberg and take Lemberg. However, they are at risk of being attacked by these Hungarian units on the next turn. They will attack, into a clear space. They might even dare coming out here to kill some units. So Lemberg is going to fall no matter what. The Hungarians, if they moved units up, would put them at risk themselves if they try to defend the city directly. So I'm going to take the path of caution and not head straight into Lemberg. I'm going to fill out the rest of the units here. So I'm going to have this guy go, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we're going to send him down here. And then we will send this guy over here, just to help kind of even out the line. I want to try to have as many combat factors in each hex as I conceivably can right now, and then we'll working our way through the Carpathians is going to be very difficult. But I think we at least want to get a good solid line going, and consider where we want to attack next. Obviously, on the next Allied impulse, we're likely going to pick up a resource, which will be another hit to Austrian and Hungarian morale. So we'll taking Lemberg, and we'll get some more political points out of it. So we're being cautious. We're moving ahead. We're solidifying our control. We could also look at taking some action here. And in fact, I think we are actually going to take a move. We're going to move Yudenich down to here. And the reason I'm doing that is that these other Russian units either have another HQ unit nearby, or they're close to a city, or they're close to a minor capital for supply, but these units down here could get cut off somehow or have theirs reduced. So I'm going to move him up. That extends our ability to project supply. And we're going to have this unit actually move here. He's still in supply because he can trace back, but he's worked his way into this area, and because he's moved here, he's protected across the river. Of course, so are these guys, but at least he's circumventing this fort hex side that you can see established here. It's projecting across this hex side. He's circumventing that, so at least that's going to help. So putting some pressure on this hex, and we might be able to actually perform some sort of attack. We could even use Yudenich for an offensive next impulse and try to crack our way into Krakow, which would be a really great gain for us if we could do it. So just like the first, central power impulse, we're really using this first one to get across enemy lines, sort of get coordinated, to be able to hit the pain points that we really like. I could have maybe set up some of this a little bit differently if I really want to try to hit Krakow, but we'll have to see. Okay, so I think that is all the land movement that we would want to take. We're not going to be debarking any units, obviously. We're not invading. And now we do have land combat. So, like before, we could look at where could we attack, and really the only places that make sense right now to even consider are right here and right here. So if we look, this is a Hungarian unit, 3 combat power in a mountain. That means its combat power is 6 defending here. We could throw 5 and 9, which would give us 3 to 2 odds, which is not great. That's a +3 to our die roll, and that's it. We'd have a -1 because we don't have observing aircraft in range to put in. So it would likely mean some of these units would die and would be defeated. I'm not ready to perform that attack yet, so we'll hold off for now. Over here, this one's a little complicated because of the terrain and the forts involved. So by itself, because there's not additional defensive terrain here, this is just 5 combat powers defending. So I'll just mark that 5 defending. Here's 7. That would be unchanged. They could attack across this hex side and be fine. So that's 7 in the first hex that could attack. Then you have 5 here that would be attacking across a fort hex side, which means that they're going to have their combat factors cut in half. So that's 2.5. Worry about rounding later. And then we have 4 here that would be attacking across a river, which is going to divide it in half, which is 2. So that would be, let's see, 12 rounded up, which I think we would round up in this case. I'm not sure I'm using fractional odds, so I'd just say I'd round up right now. So, yeah, 12 to 5. That's 2 to 1 odds. That's +4. We don't have an observer. Back down to +3. See, it's not worth it. Not worth it. You can look at the combat tables and see. There's a chance that we could win, and we could knock some of these units out. We could take the fort. There'd be a lot of great gains for doing this, but we would likely take hits in return and would soften our front here. And you just know the Germans are going to want to smash through. So I don't think it's worth attacking here. Not right now. If we power up Yudenich later with a offensive, then we could do that. In retrospect, I could have chosen to do an offensive right now, or rather, you would signify this at the beginning of your land action, and that actually would maybe be enough. If I look, that maybe would be enough to make it worthwhile. Tough to say. So I think I'm going to just leave it alone for now, and we'll get into offensives on the next impulse when Austria-Hungary uses some of their offensive points to strike at the Serbians, or vice versa here. It'll depend on what we decide we want to do. Germans are going to be jumping in as well, so there's going to be all kinds of fun activities here. Then finally, if we're not going to be doing land combat, I swear there'll be combat soon. Is there any reorganization that we want to do? No. None that we could do anyway, even if we wanted to. Although we do have we have 2 air missions that we ought to use. So, just kind of poking around. There's no use doing anything with this one. This one... Let's consider the possibility of attacking Krakow. I'm going to have this guy actually move here. So he's set up that he can observe into this hex next impulse. This unit, I think we do want to move up. Question is, where do we want to put it? I think it makes most sense just to put it here, so that it gets pretty good coverage of the whole front here. Yeah. Okay, so air mission's done. Any reorganization we want to do, no. And now we would look at if there was going to be a die roll to end the turn. There is not going to be. We're simply going to be moving on to Impulse 3 with the Central Powers at play. I'm going to check my timestamp here. I'm at 46 minutes. So I think that's all I'm going to do for this video today. It's still feeling like we haven't done a whole lot, but things will ramp up here very, very quickly, and I will try to, speed things up and go over things faster for things that we've already done as we get to it. The next impulse is going to involve Germany's activation. And it's going to be a pretty big one, right? So the next big action will be, in the third impulse, Germany must declare war on Russia and France. That's going to cause a bunch of declaration of war chit pools. The Central Powers will, this is going to trigger just the general war. Austria-Hungary will probably take a land action and do some stuff. Germany will likely... or Germany, I think, maybe has to take a land action. Oh, it doesn't actually say that. So Germany could take whatever action they want, though I imagine it'll probably be a land action, and we'll see some interesting things like the attack into Belgium, maybe even attacking into lower France down here in the south, and, like I said before, attacks into Serbia, and we might even see the Germans try to put some pressure on the Russians. I'm not sure what's going to happen yet. The Germans don't have that many forces out here at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see how we do it. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please put those in the comment section below. Like and subscribe, or do any of that good fun stuff as you like. And we'll see you next time on the next video. Thanks.